3. Greetings, family, and welcome to the H20 Network. This is Nunez. I'm so excited about our next guest. I'm sitting with a fellow water sister, and let me just show you the book. I tell you, when Simon & Schuster Inner Traditions sent me the list of authors that were coming out with books, I was really excited about Kathryn W. Ravenwood. She is a priestess of water. She's been studying the Mysteries family for over 40 years. Yes, I said 40 years. And she's created this wonderful book called How to Create Sacred Water, a Guide to Rituals and Practices. And the reason why I'm happy about this book is because I've read a lot of books about water. However, it is coming from a fellow water sister and from a shamanistic perspective, which I think is very, very important at this time. I really believe that this interview is very synchronistic in nature because we need to have a better spiritual understanding of water. But before we get going, hi, sis. Thank you for joining the HO Network. I'm so excited for today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to meet you finally.
Finally, I know this Mercury retrograde has been something else, but I'm so glad that we're now in the shadow phase and we can move forth into the sunlight.
That's right. Onward we go.
Onward we go. So let's get down to business, sister, my fellow water sister.
Right.
You know, when I was reading your book, I found it very interesting how spirit works, and I really want to talk about your path. I understand that you were a Mormon who grew up in Wyoming. That's very fascinating, darling. Please do tell.
I even went to BYU for a while.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, I've often wondered, in retrospect, why did Spirit put me into a Mormon family? What kind of karma was that? And I don't really know, except that the Mormon Church is interesting in that it tells you that it believes in modern day revelation, but you know that doesn't mean I get to be a modern day revelator. It means they do. But it was a very, I think the best part about it was just being in Wyoming. I grew up in the 50s in Wyoming, and we didn't lock our doors. In the summer, I got on my bike and I was gone all day. My mother had no idea where I was. I was out in the prairies, rubbing sage all over my body. Who knew? I'd sleep outside at night, look at the stars, collecting lizards and things, and hanging out with cottonwood trees and just being in nature. And I grew up that way, which was really wonderful. The Mormon upbringing was very restrictive. And I found myself, I quickly rebelled against all of that. And that was like in 1967, 1968. Well, there was a lot of other stuff going on in 1967 and 1968. And I jumped into that with both feet. So I went from a little conservative, very, very naive Mormon girl to sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Not too bad. Sometimes I wish I could time travel just to party, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot going on back then.
Yeah. And it was interesting because that experience really put me into more of a spiritual nature than the party nature. And it didn't take me long to want to give up the party stuff and really focus on the spiritual. So when I was about 19, I guess, I started really studying metaphysical things as much as I could. This would be to like go to the only bookstore in Casper, Wyoming that sold anything metaphysical and bring home any kind of a book that I could read. And I started doing that, like say, around 19 and studying on my own. I had no one to talk to. No one I knew believed in these things like I did. So it was me and communing with the stars and out in the sage-covered prairies of Wyoming and the big cottonwood trees. And I did this on my own for a very long time.
Do you think that particular timeline, because I talked to a lot of wise women and men who grew up during that time and were either Mormons, well, you're the second Mormon, Catholic, whatever. And because of the things that were going on, it sort of kind of opened the door. They knew that it wasn't their starting space because their family was a part of that too, but it sort of kind of opened the cosmic hole a little bit, and they went out on their own and found their path. I mean, what was that like for you? Because when you come from a family who comes from the mainstream, and they have certain understandings, but they don't really have a deep understanding of the spiritual. How was that path for you? I mean, that's very hard for people to deal with.
It was, it was very hard. And, conservative Republican family, I was never conservative. I was the one that asked all the questions. I was, the psychedelic black sheep of the family. Everybody thought I was crazy. I didn't go along with the flow. And it was very scary, because I had no precedents. I had no one to look to say, it's okay. I had no older, wiser women that would say, that's all right, girl, you're on the path now, Spirit's calling you. And all these years later, we can do that for one another as we're coming onto this path. But in those days, there really wasn't anybody. So I had to do it with my books. And if I didn't have my books, I don't know what I would have done. And eventually you start finding people that kind of explore the same thing you do. Fortunately for me, I discovered the tarot early on, which was a fabulous tool for me. And that gave me even more to study. But even then, I didn't know hardly anybody who knew anything about that. So for me, it was my books. And it was very isolating in a lot of ways. And I felt like I had this unresolved part of me that really wanted to know things, that really needed to be doing something else. And yet I was kind of trapped in my traditional upbringing, expectation way of living. And it took me a while to sort all that out. Thankfully, I sorted it out.
Oh, without a doubt. And this is one of the reasons why I love your book about sacred water, because I think that the way that you present it will be able to help people open up that channel for themselves and to find a way. I really love books that are manuals on everything above. I'm a Saggy. What can I say? I am the spiritual explorer, and I love authors who give information about their lives and their journey and the way that they've created their sacred spaces and how to do that, so you can actually take that step to open up. And, the relationship with water and spirituality, I think that everyone can tap into it, but it's very special. Yes, I am biased. I'm a daughter of Yemaya, so what can I say? How did you figure out that that was going to be your alchemy? Because I perceive that everyone has a different alchemy. There are priests of fire, priests of, the earth, priests of water. How did you know that you were meant to be the conduit for this consciousness, per se?
Spirit told me. I was out, it was when Hurricane Floyd ravaged through North Carolina. I think that was in like 1998 or something, like 1995, something like that. I don't remember now. And I was out walking around Green Lake in Seattle, which is gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful fall day. It's absolutely stunning weather then in Seattle. And I'm walking around this beautiful lake, and I'm thinking about this hurricane. And it had gone through and just ravaged the waterways of North Carolina with literally millions of carcasses of dead animals that had been washed and flooded out of factory farms into the rivers and out into the North Carolina waterways. And I was thinking, how much is too much before the watershed can purify this water? And Spirit said to me, you could make a crystal homeopathic elixir that would heal the waters of Gaia. And I'm like, what? I never heard Spirit talk to me like that. I'm like, whoa, what? I had no idea. So I started asking friends, do you know anything about crystal elixirs? And, I knew about homeopaths. I didn't know about crystal elixirs. The internet was very sparse then. I looked up a few things, but I really didn't get anything. And then I thought, if I'm supposed to do this, it'll be revealed to me. And step by step, Spirit revealed this to me. And it was hysterical because I always complained that Spirit never talked to me. And then Spirit's giving me very specific instructions and I'm arguing. So like, for instance, I was out on my lunch break and Spirit said, go into this antique store here. There's a crystal you need to get. And I'm standing outside on the sidewalk and I said, hey, this store doesn't carry crystals. It carries clothes and furniture. I literally out loud arguing the Spirit. I go inside and there's an amethyst about this big and this strange looking crystal. I had no idea what it was. And I bought the amethyst, took it back to my, where I was working. I was a massage therapist then. And Spirit said, why didn't you get the other one? So I go back. The woman thinks I'm out of my mind. I look at it again, and I'm thinking, this is plastic. I don't know what this is. This isn't any kind of crystal, and I've loved rocks my whole life. I'm like, I don't know. This is nothing. And I went back again. And I'm washing the amethyst, cleaning it up, and Spirit said, go get the crystal. So I go running down the street again, and I bought it. And so I came back, and I'm washing this amethyst under the sink. And as the water's going over the amethyst, I can feel the purple of the amethyst go down through my hands and up my arms.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow. Now, I grew up in Wyoming. I played with rocks my whole life. I would put them in my mouth. I would make my mother take me to the rock store way out of town. And I never had anything like this happen before. Well, I found out that the rock, the other crystal, was selenite, which I didn't know anything about. And that was the beginning of my water altar. And so I'm a Cancer born on the full moon. So the instructions I got were to make a water altar from full moon to full moon, to make it be a crystal homeopathic elixir for Gaia. Not for me, not for you, for Gaia. And so what I came to learn from Spirit was I took this amethyst, which just my friend Starfeather, who I did circles with, gave me a big punch bowl. I still have the punch bowl. I still have the amethyst. Never is, by the way, no algae or anything's on it, and I've used it all these years. So I put it in there, covered it with water, and like homeopaths, I took that selenite and I would stir it and pray over it and put energy into it and say prayers for the water. And I'd cover it up and I'd keep it. And on the full moon, I took it out and I put it in bottles and I made little labels for the bottles. This was before anybody had heard about Dr. Emoto. I wrote beautiful things on labels and put the labels on the bottles. And then I would go out and give it to the water and do prayers and blessings.
This is very fascinating. I just had a realization.
And I had done nothing like, I'd never done anything like this in my life.
Well, the reason why I say it's fascinating is because you said you're a Cancer, right?
Yeah. I'm a Cancer.
I'm a Cancer moon.
Oh, I'm a Cancer, and I was born on the full Capricorn moon.
Wow. That's very interesting. Well,
that's right, sister.
Yes, honey, we are sisters. And speaking,
right.
Since you went down that road, okay, hello. Since you went down that road, I find it very interesting. Astrology does play into this because I always like to know the alchemical makeup of an individual. Do you perceive, and I asked another author this question, Trish McGregor, who just came out with this wonderful book. Do you think water signs are here to really usher the way for humanity into this new paradigm of consciousness and being able to receive certain things, to be able to ground the planet on many different levels? I mean, let's face it, look at where we are with the consciousness of humanity. It's not really in a very enriching place as a whole. There are pockets, of course, because we exist and other spiritual people exist, but as a mass paradigm, do you think it could be the contract of certain water signs to help humanity ground certain things, protect certain things, make people aware of certain things?
I think that's a contract for every sign. I don't think it's exclusive because I think astrology, the makeup of our astrology when we come in is so specific to us. And I think there are certain gifts that we all come in with and certain ways of expressing things. Like I have Venus and Leo in the 10th house. So I'm a very obvious teacher. I'm out there. I'm very public. And I'm okay with that. I don't have stage fright. I never have, even as a kid. And so it's fine for me to get out and be public. I have writing skills. My sun is in the 9th house, your house. So I have all of this. My sun and my Mercury are in the 9th house, which gives me this connection to all of this higher learning that I have just absorbed my whole life. But I think that it's not just water signs. I think there are a lot of people out there that are really, truly bringing in their peace. And I think that if we don't bring in our peace, because nobody has the same astrological makeup, we're all individual. And if we don't do our individual piece, then it's like part of it's missing. It's like we're all part of a great big quilt, patchwork quilt, and then all the little stitching that stitches all the quilts together. Some people are very good about grounding. Some people are very good about teaching. Some people are very good with connecting with spirit and getting the information, but they don't know what to do with it after that. You know, they're not so good about teachers. They're more channels. So I don't know. I think water signs, of course, tend to be more, touchy-feely and maybe tuned in that way. But boy, I know people who have strong earth or fire signs, and they have a strong water sense in them, and that picks it up too. So I think we all have our part to do.
Absolutely. And we all, the machine is very much important, and all of the parts coming together is very paramount at this time. And speaking about Dr. Imoto Ibaye, because he's no longer here on planet Earth, and man, I remember hearing about him and reading some of his research. And I remember at one point I was trying to interview him, but unfortunately he passed away. Yeah. Do you perceive that his scientific research has really changed the paradigm in the way that mainstream media and just people in general think about water? I mean, it's amazing what he has revealed.
Absolutely, I do. And even if people think it's a hokum or bullshit or whatever you want to call it, it still makes them think about it. It still brings their awareness to it. And the visuals are so amazing. His photography work is just so mind-blowing. And not only just with the words, but music. You know, he shows pictures of water exposed to like Mozart and water exposed to heavy metal. It's just unbelievable to me. And I think we all know that our consciousness and our focus, quantum physics tells us that just by being aware of something, we're changing the paradigm on it. And I believe that. I have a scientist son who sometimes thinks that mom's a little weird, but, you know, it's all right. We all do our part. But I really feel that what we put our attention to changes things. And water is so flowing and it's so amazing. And it's like all of us are drops in that flowing water. Every one of us is individual. And when we change our focus on how we are in that, it changes the other people around us. And eventually the whole gets changed. So little bits, I mean, I think small prayers can do way more than we probably even can imagine for the great body of the water and for the whole earth. Oh, I think we have more power. I think we have way more power than we realize. And when it's used badly, we can really see that. But people don't trust how much that same energy used positively can make a huge difference.
You're absolutely correct. And I pondered this question with many consciousness research people and asked the question, and they're like, oh, I didn't really think of that. Do you think the reason why they can't figure out, and again, I will do a side note, I don't think everything's meant to know. However, there are doorways that will advance the evolution of our consciousness. Do you think that they're not looking into the research of water deeply enough and not really making the connections between consciousness and water? Because from my perception, sis, our brain is suspended in water. It is the conduit that allows the electricity, and it changes form in order to attach to certain materials in the brain so information can get exchanged. So do you think that science is really delving deep enough into this topic of water and consciousness together?
I do not. And I think that I don't know why that science in general, and that doesn't mean every scientist, but science in general it's so you can't prove that, so it's not true.
Correct.
Well, no, we can't always prove a consciousness experience. I can have a shamanic experience and connect with my guides and have them give me amazing information. I've had experiences working with water that are mind-blowing to me, and a scientist would tell me, you just made that up.
Wow.
You were dreaming. You were just thinking about it. But, you can't prove to me that it didn't happen. But it's not a concrete thing. It's fluid. It's moving. I don't think I think there's a lot of good science out there, so I don't want to be a bad rap to anybody, but I don't think there's even a minutia of understanding how our consciousness works to back it up scientifically. I think that that's coming, and I'm not well read on that, but I have friends who study that a lot. And there are people who are really out there working on that and trying to make that connection to bridge the consciousness and the absolute science part of it. Because I think we're going to find out eventually it's all the same. It's just how we're talking about it and defining it. How can science say that what we're all experiencing isn't true when there's just no words and definition for it yet?
Absolutely. Our human capacity, our consciousness can't even the word, sis, of infinity. When you talk about the creator and, the omnipotent and omnipresent, you can't even really comprehend that. And going back to the elders, my elder, Oba Ernesto Pichardo, would tell me stories about how back in the day, people would take a glass of water and literally heal another human being. I mean, like, for real. No candles, no nothing, but a glass of water. They were able to channel the information that they needed in order for a person to move forward spiritually or physically, just mind-blowing, the energy and the consciousness of water itself. And speaking about consciousness, what do you perceive about modern society in water? Because if water is a consciousness, we have to wonder about all of these chemicals that they're putting in water, how they're changing the biographical structure of water. What is that doing to the essence of the human being itself? We're intaking that water, and people are not really thinking about that. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. Garbage in, garbage out. And the water, yes, it's purified so that it doesn't make us sick. But how is it purified? It's purified with chlorine. It goes through all these treatment plants. And water has memory. And so it used to be in a natural world, water would flow and it would go down waterfalls, and that aeration of the waterfall would help clean it. It would go underground, and it would take who knows how long filtering through the underground to clean itself. It would recollect in aquifers. Well, we pumped our aquifers practically dry. And what we haven't pumped, we're fracking and throwing all kinds of horrid chemicals into the water. Horrid. I mean, unbelievably horrible. Clear itself. The rivers used to do what's called oxbow. They would circle around and make these oxbow turns. And all of that was to help the water move and circulate and purify. And now the Army Corps of Engineers comes in and dredges all the rivers so it's all straight, because, that's better for a boat to go on. The treatment plants are pouring more chemicals into it and putting it right back out. Somebody told me one time, basically all water is liquid toilet paper.
Wow.
And we're drinking that. And it's in our food and it's in our plants. And yes, I think, look around, it's a very toxic world. And I think that every single bit of work we can do to help the water, and yes, the world is 80% water, we're 80% water. Big coincidence, huh?
And this is why I think, indeed, well, it's high, and this is you just brought up another reason why I think that your book is very much important. Because we're taking in all of these man-made chemicals to make it drinkable, we're
Yeah.
ruining and damaging our energetic bodies. Therefore, we're not able to pick up the spiritual information that we need to connect with the ether.
Yeah.
So therefore, the book that you have created re-evaluates how we look at water, putting our own ache energy into the water to make it whole again, to cleanse it from a spiritual, esoteric place, so we can literally clean our portals to receive the
Yeah.
information from the Akashic records. Now,
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. We're the batteries.
yeah,
We're the conduits. Like you say, we're the conduits, we're the batteries. And if we're not running on a full charge.
mm-mm.
And so we think science isn't picking up on consciousness. Well, we're not picking up on a lot of it either because we're so restricted with toxicities.
Well, since
Both
you said,
physical and all the distractible, all the stuff that's so distracting out there, the electronics and everybody's conversations. I mean, everything is in this great soup. Our consciousness is like a huge soup, and we all live in it. So something happens in your neighborhood that's awful. I may not know about it, but I might very well feel it because it ripples. It ripples like when you throw a stone in the water. And eventually we have a lot of people throwing a lot of stones out there.
a lot of stones. Now, since you said that,
Very, very disruptive.
I'm going to go down this rabbit hole. And for some, this may sound crazy, but as my perception of this reality, whether we know it or not, we are all connected, whether we want to be or not. With the things that are going on in humanity, I haven't watched TV in a very long time. I don't even turn on my television. But with the advent of massive violence, all of the things that are going on, I find it very interesting that this is paralleling the contamination of the oceans. And, you know, it's like a media spectacle, of course, and then people forget about it. But while people forget about it, this energy from the water is percolating in the human system of things. People are drinking it, and you see massive violence out in the world. What's your perception on this whole thing?
Oh, I think that's brilliant. I think that there's no way I would say that's not true. And the water's going into the ground, it's going into the plants, it's going into our food, it's coming up, we wash with it, we do our hair with it, we brush our teeth with it, we drink it, we consume it, and we send it all back out there full of shampoos and soap and cleaning fluids and human, you know, we have the human waste, of course, animal waste, toxicities, all the chemicals. I mean, I remember back in like 1970 when rivers burned. Rivers would be on fire. But now we just frack it and let it come out of your faucets able to ignite. But I remember literally rivers being on fire because people just dumped everything right from the factories straight into the river. Now, fortunately, the EPA has helped with that quite a bit. My son was very angry with me when he was young. He said, "Your generation screwed everything up." I said, "Whoa, wait a minute. My generation, you know, at least we brought the EPA around, you know." But I agree with you. And look at the oceans. My God. We're killing our oceans. How can we do that? And it's plastic. Plastic is what you can see, but think of all the stuff you can't see that's in there. Fracking is something like, I could look it up in the back of my book. It's something like 154 different chemicals are the little cocktail they do in fracking, and it's proprietary, so they don't release it. But they say, oh, it's all natural.
Well, as you know, in the agricultural system and also the oil business, natural does not really mean natural. It's an industry standard definition of natural, which may completely go against what we perceive to be natural. It's very tricky. Family, if you don't believe me, do your research.
Arsenic is natural.
Yeah,
arsenic is natural.
Indeed,
I don't really
but
want
it'll
to eat
kill
it,
you.
but Yeah, if you eat enough of it, it's going to kill you, you know. I guess if you do enough pure oxygen, that'll kill you. But it's this combination of everything, you know. The world is uniquely balanced. And for a long, long time, we have disrupted that balance. And it's critical for people to make any effort they can to come back into balance. One of the things that really doing this work with the water that I did for so many years was it put me in a relationship with the water where I maybe had taken it for granted. I mean, I grew up in Wyoming. We'd go hiking and stop at the river and just drink out of the river. And you didn't get sick. That was in the old days. There weren't a lot of people around, so it wasn't a lot of pollution. But I would go out and do prayers and blessings on the water. And yeah, I believe that that's a giving back and it's a reciprocation. But it put me into a relationship with water. It got me out of my house. It got me out walking around in beautiful places. It got me out looking at the water, thinking about it, watching it, being more aware of it, and realizing, oh my gosh, you know, this is the open artery of our mother. How would you like to walk around with your arteries wide open all the time and people dumping crap in it all day long? Just think about it. If you have a little cut that's bleeding, and people put stuff in it, it gets so infected. Our mother has her arteries and veins wide open all day long, and we pour stuff into it constantly.
Without even thinking twice, and we perceive it to, you know, to be normal of sorts. And speaking about water, how did the ancients, because you know I have to talk about this Egyptian priestess. You better work, girlfriend. Work that Egyptian magic. I love it. And I say that because my memories of Egypt are so profound. Like the first book that I ever received from my father was a book about King Tutankhamun, and you know, I used to look at that book a million times. I did the opening for Aida because I was a dancer. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah, I actually got to dance at the exhibition for Ramses II when he came to Colorado when I was a little girl, and I got to see his body. And then when I, you know, was in New York, I got to meet, it's almost like Night at the Museum, a guy who worked at the museum, the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art. Natural history, I mean. And he would tell me tons of stories about when they would bring the sarcophaguses and the bodies in from the motherland and like all the weirdness and the spirits walking around. An older black guy. And I don't know why he would tell me all these things, but it was, I guess, when you feel a spiritual connection with someone, because at the time I was an art student. So the fact that you are going to the mother of the Nile, the Egyptians worshiped the Nile. It was the blood of the people. It was the blood of the land. It gave fertility and made things grow. What was it like going to Egypt for the first time and having that experiences of the ancients walking around?
The first time I've been twice, only twice. I have friends who've gone many, 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 many times. I've been twice. The first time I went, I got out of the plane, I fell to the ground and started weeping.
Wow.
And I cried a lot. It was hard to sleep. When you are on the Nile and you realize where you are, and you go up into these temples, and we were able to do ceremony on the altars.
Oh.
So I'm at the temple of Isis at Philae, and I'm actually laying out the altar items to do our ritual on that altar. This is profound beyond means. And the Nile, the inundation of the Nile is what started the new year in Egypt. And if the inundation, meaning the flood, now it's dammed. By the way, since they've dammed the Nile, they use a lot of that electricity that they get with the Nile to make fertilizer. Anyway, the inundation of the Nile was absolutely critical. And if it didn't happen, there would be no crops, there would be nothing. It would be famine. But during the inundation of the Nile, when the water was so high, you couldn't farm because it was flooded. So that's when people did a lot of ritual. And it was a wonderful time to be able to have a break and celebrate the beginning of the Egyptian New Year, celebrate the gods, do the processions at the temples, and then when the water would go down a little bit, you could go back and start farming again. So the inundation of the Nile, absolutely critical. And there are many river gods. There are many Nile river gods. And most of the temples, of course, well, now it's changed, but they were along the Nile. And so that energy was always coming in.
When you were there,
It's
did you?
phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
I just like, I'm looking at you and I'm like feeling the energy through the video cam, and I'm excited for you, and to be honest, I'm actually scared to go to Egypt as of now until I need to grow a little bit more, because I know that experience for my spirit is going to be very, very, very profound, and I have to be ready for that. And because the ancients, the ancestors are waiting to talk for one that hears. As soon as you, and I've heard that from many people, as soon as they get off the plane, there's certain places on the planet, if you're a spiritual person, that the ancestors speak. Like, for example, when I went to Cuba for the first time, there was an ancestor waiting for me on the tarmac. You know what I'm saying? And I'm looking, and I'm the person I'm with, I'm like, do you see that? And they're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get this. And, you know, you talk about crying. When I was in Cuba on the last nights that I was there, I cried, and I couldn't stop crying. It's like they didn't want me to leave. And I received a lot of spiritual gifts and a lot of information and insight. How did the water gods approach you? How did the Eguns, the word for the ancestors that are no longer here on planet Earth, approach you? Did they come in the dream time? Did you have walking visions? I mean, I've heard some extraordinary stories about Egypt and people's connection.
For me, I have to say that the way they communicated with me in Egypt was I could just feel it all. I didn't actually see them, but I would have these profound experiences and these feelings, and I would know they were there. Just so much happened that you can't really fathom, and you have to think about it later. We went right after 9/11 happened, and there was hardly anybody there, because everybody had canceled. Our tour had been 44, and we were down to 9. And we were at the step temple of Saqqara, and there's the tomb of Unas is there, which is very, very special and very, very restricted. And they were grateful, and they let us go into the tomb of Unas. And when you come in, it's these perfectly amazing hieroglyphs. And I was looking at the stars, and I thought, how can all of these hieroglyphs, these perfectly spaced, the same size, they're all the same depth, how do they do this? It was just like, how did this happen? So we're in the tomb of Unas, and I was with Nikki Scully, and she had arranged, the lights went out. We did a meditation, and the lights went out. And so you could be in the dark in the tomb. And I look over at the wall on my right, and I see these two electric blue beings with the big high hat like Osiris would wear. And they're hovering about 6 feet off the ground, and they hold up their blue luminous fingers, and they said, watch.
Wow.
And they proceeded to laser the walls with hieroglyphs. Now that I saw, and I rubbed my eyes and looked again, and they were still there. Watch. They were just answering my question. It's like, how did you do it? This is how we did it. We did it this way. And I'm blown away. And for as many things like that people see, there are so many things that get downloaded and imprinted in you. You can't process it all at once. You just can't. And certain temples do different things for different people. A lot of the people I went are huge Sekhmet devotees, as I am. But being in Sekhmet's temple was not as profound to me as being in Dendera and seeing Nut, the Sky Mother, which threw me to the ground and made me weep for the whole time we were in the temple. You have different connections and different things come through. And then just being on the water, and you realize you're on the Nile. And back in that time, you could still take water on the plane. So I would take my water from my water altar with me. And Nikki and I went down after we left the temple of Isis at Philae. We walked down to the river to do blessings and prayers and give the water to the Nile. And this is right after 9/11, and the whole trip we're guarded with guys with big guns. We were never alone. And we walked down to the river, she and I, with our arm around each other, with our little bottles of water. We're saying prayers and pouring water into the Nile and having this wonderful time. And I look up, and there's two big guys with guns protecting us.
Wow.
And nobody said, "What are you doing? You can't put anything in the water." They're just protecting us.
Spirit has to get things done, honey. They made sure that the guardians were there. And, I'm listening to you, and it just blows my mind, because when you go to sacred sites all over the planet, I've heard many stories from people who've gone to Egypt and, Stonehenge and other places and their experiences. Even the artifacts, sis, are powerful. And you have to really be careful what you ask for, because I remember being at the New York Museum and sitting in front of Hatshepsut. I love Hatshepsut. And I said to her, "Show me your secrets. I will never do that again, girlfriend." I said, "Show me your secrets." I don't know why I had the big guns to think I could do that, but I did it. And I was an art student transferring over to media studies. And I sat and I drew a little bit of her, and I meditated. And let me tell you something. The dream that I had to show who I was in a particular timeline blew my mind. And I said to myself, "Ooh, dear girl, you got to slow down. You got to be careful, because you're dealing with something you don't know nothing about." This was when I was in my 20s. I'm in my mid 40s now. But those artifacts all over the planet are so powerful in giving people information about themselves and downloads. I love hearing this story. They're just powerful, and they're very powerful right now, because, and I'm not trying to be like, a rhetoric person, but I'm calling a spade a spade. We are not in a very good place when it comes to our consciousness and how we think as a collective. So right now, spiritual people of all kinds are getting downloads to be able to bring information, full-fledged forward, so we can contribute in a higher place, because we don't manifest things from the flesh. It comes from the spiritual to the planet Earth. It comes from the cosmos down on planet Earth through their priests and conduits. So that's a very powerful story. The Nile, I would be like that too. The Nile, sitting, that's insane.
I don't know now. Now I couldn't even take the water with me. But we took it. I had 6 bottles of it, like this size, and I split it up into smaller bottles. It was about a gallon's worth of water. And Nikki and I took it and put it in the Nile at every temple, and we put it in there. We took it to the Red Sea. We got to go to the Red Sea, and we put it everywhere. When we put it in at the Red Sea, I had a vision there. And we're standing at this beautiful place. We're putting water in the Red Sea. We're praying. And at that time, I lived in Seattle. And I saw this huge grizzly bear and a salmon come up out of the water. This is in the Red Sea. And I knew what was happening was the water of Egypt and the water back in the Pacific Northwest were talking. They were converged. The water knew that I was there. And it was saying, "Hey, I know you're here. Here's grizzly bear and salmon. Just checking in. We're there with you, girl." Oh, it's amazing that the water sent that up to me. It's like I'm halfway around the world. I'm in Africa. And back in Seattle, the water there's going, "Woo-hoo, we're here with you."
That's amazing.
All connected, all flowing, all aware all the time.
Well, if you look at the maps of the ocean and the currents and the way that everything glides and slithers together, and then the mere fact that within our bodies we are comprised of water, it is what gives us health. I mean, we take vitamins, and that information from those vitamins gets saturated in the water in our body and goes to where it needs to go in order for our body to function. So it's almost like we're getting downloads of information not just on planet Earth, but from the ether. I mean, good God, man, space and the galaxy, we are stardust, literally. So not only can we communicate with the essence of the water on planet Earth, but water in the cosmos. And I believe that that's why we're able, there's some kind of synthesis that happens when we do meditation with our brain suspended in that huge thing of water, and we're able to open up the portals and get information. And speaking about the information in that big old satellite up in the sky, what's going on with the moon and your connection in the moon and water? That's very, very important.
Well, for me, because I was born in the full moon, and the moon cycle, of course, that's our natural cycle. Things start, it goes from the dark, phase by phase by phase, to full, comes back down. This happens all the time. And look how the moon controls the tides. So if it's controlling the tides of the ocean that much, think what it's doing to the tides in our bodies. So it changes signs every 2.5 days, and it goes void, of course, and then it moves into a new sign. So every about 2.5 days, the moon is blank, and then it moves into a new place. Well, if you don't think, if people don't think that's not happening inside your body, I'm sorry, it has to be. It just is. If it affects the oceans that much, and all the creatures in the ocean, I mean, think about all the animals that come out when the moon comes out. It's this natural cycle. And we are not above that. We are part of that. And so for me, working with the water, and because Spirit told me to do a full moon to full moon on the water altar. Also, I'm a priestess of Thoth, who's a moon god. Who knew, figures. But that's how I was told to do it. There's plenty of ways to do it. That's the way I was told to do it. So I would be out on the full moon doing my blessings, and, sometimes in Seattle, there'd be like a -3.5 tide. You could walk way out and really get into that space of this is what happens when the moon is doing her work. A -3.5 tide gives you an enormous amount of beach to walk on you don't normally have. And there's usually nobody out at night walking on the beach. So you have a chance to go out and explore all of that. And it's very safe because it takes hours and hours to come back. And that is a pretty trippy experience. And then you can look out and the moon will set, and it will just set down and sink right over the water, and like it's floating on the water. I miss that living in New Mexico. But here the moon is, the skies are so much more clear. We have a huge better view of the moon than we used to regularly in the Pacific Northwest. But I'm very affected by the moon.
I am as well, and that's one of the the good things I can say about Colorado is because of the altitude. There are things that I've seen at this altitude, sis, that I have never seen anywhere else in the world or the country. Yeah. The full moons here are like unreal. And, Spirit has me get up early in the morning to see the moon coming over to the mountains to the west. And, when it comes up, it's phenomenal. And the alchemy that you can receive and pull into your being is very, very profound in nature. And speaking about the moon, the water, and the pull, because I really feel that pull at this high altitude, what about crystals? Because I know that you use crystals. To me, crystals are liquefied information. It's water, but just in a different type of form and a different type of record. So how do you combine the two? That's a wonderful combination. As a matter of fact, got a bowl back there with some crystals. Love it.
I know. You said that, and I was thinking the exact same thing. If the crystals are basically full of water, there's lots and lots of water in there. And so, yes, they're charged up by it. So people who work with crystals will regularly tell you, go out and charge your crystals again in the full moon. Take them out in the moonlight. Let them get cleaned up and charged up there. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, can you just imagine all the activity that's going on at night with the moon, with the animals and the dirt and the crystals and the atmosphere? If we could tune into it, it would be like this huge, enormous symphony of people, of all this stuff happening. It would be jumping around and excited and doing all these things. And information traveling back and forth all over the place, and we're, sleeping away.
That's
But
funny.
if you go, and the fairies and all these beings are out, playing in the moonlight.
Oh, that's funny you say that, because I had a friend who just came back from Peru, and he was like, oh man, when I was sitting in the forest, I didn't need anything, because all you heard was all of the energy from all of these levels of consciousness, and from the ground, and to see the full moon or the new moon, it was amazing. He was like, it's like you're a sponge. Your sensory perception just changes, and you just soak everything in. It's one of the most amazing things in the world. And that's one thing I can say too about Colorado, that I love the mountains.
Absolutely. And the trees are full of water.
Yes.
And the trees they bring in the rain. The trees are huge, making the water happen. So you can only imagine what the moon's doing to the trees. Now there's a big dance going on out there. And we can participate or not. And most people don't. And just have to practice. I think the most important thing is you just have to show up, and you have to practice, and you have to ask, Spirit, I don't know anything about this. I don't know. Raven said the trees are full of water and dance with the moon. What the hell does that mean? What does that mean? We'll go outside and sit with the tree and talk to the tree. You might be surprised. Pick up a rock. You ever had a rock follow you around? I have.
Oh, I'm drawing on rocks. Absolutely. They're the record keepers.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So there's so much going on we don't know about. The crystals, all the elementals are in sync. And water, I can't remember who I read at one time, and I'm sorry that I can't quote whoever it was. But in the book, they were referring to the moisture of the mind of God.
I know you can't say anything. You can't.
No. The moisture of the mind of God is where everything comes from. Water.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's, Saturn's rings are supposed to be made of ice. Hello? You think we're the only ones that have water? So maybe the water that you drink in your tea this morning used to be in Saturn's ice rings. Could be. Lots of stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like you're an old sister friend, and I could be on here for hours, and I want, wow, we have to do this again. And I'm not sharing any rituals. Sorry. I don't want you to share any rituals, because I want everybody to buy this book. Why? Because this is a guidebook. And, my purpose was to come on here and to sit with my water sister and to talk about water and to give people a different perspective. But family, How to Create Sacred Water, A Guide to Rituals and Practices by Kathryn W. Ravenwood. Awesome, awesome book by Inner Traditions.
Thank you.
I'm so delighted that you spent time with me. Now you're a part of the H20 Network family, honey. So now I can harass you whenever you write a new book, and we can sit and have another powwow. Yay!
Yay! Yay!
Thank you so much for your gift.
Very grateful. I'm very grateful for Inner Traditions for publishing this book. And I'm so grateful to Spirit for the journey. And if you want to go on my website, there's more information about me, KathrynRavenwood.com. The book is available on Amazon. It's available directly through Inner Traditions.
And also give your website is KathrynRavenwood.com, correct?
Yes, Kathryn. KathrynRavenwood.com.
Make sure that you go to her website, family. She has all kinds of goodies, from her blog to tarot. Good God, man. I was like, I need to get off this website so I can actually talk to you. There's so many goodies that are happening, and she does retreats. So make sure, I'm going to put the links down below this video, family. Kathryn, I thank you so much. I send you a lot of love, sister.
Love to you too. Thank you so much. And thank you, water.
Indeed.
Thank you, water.
Until next time.
Okay.
Bye, sweetheart.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, family.